In the heart of the Pacific Northwest, where the towering trees loomed like ancient guardians and the whispers of the wind carried tales of forgotten secrets, there dwelled a man named John. With a rugged demeanor and a spirit as unyielding as the mountains themselves, John was a seasoned hunter who had long called the wilderness his home. His weathered face bore the marks of countless battles with nature, and his keen eyes held a wisdom forged in the crucible of survival. For years, John had roamed the untamed wilderness, navigating its treacherous terrain with a skill born of necessity. He knew every twist and turn of the forest, every hidden glade and shadowed vale, as intimately as he knew the lines on his own weathered face. But on one ominous night, as twilight descended and the forest was cloaked in a veil of darkness, John's mastery of the wild would be put to the ultimate test. Armed with his trusty rifle and a lifetime of experience, John set out into the depths of the forest, his senses alert for any sign of danger. The air was heavy with the scent of pine and damp earth, and the only sound was the soft crunch of leaves beneath his boots. Yet, despite the outward calm, John could sense a tension in the air, a primal energy that seemed to pulse with a life of its own. It was a feeling he had experienced many times before, the unmistakable sense that he was not alone in the wilderness, that there were unseen eyes watching his every move with a mix of curiosity and hunger. As the night wore on, John's senses sharpened, attuned to the subtlest of sounds and movements in the darkness. He moved like a shadow through the trees, his every step calculated and deliberate, his eyes scanning the shadows for any hint of movement. But try as he might, he could find no trace of the creature he sought, no sign of its presence save for the eerie silence that hung like a shroud over the forest. It was unnerving, this sense of being hunted in turn by something he could not see nor fully comprehend. And yet John pressed on, his determination unshaken by the fear that gnawed at his insides like a hungry beast. Then, just when John's nerves were stretched taut as bowstrings, he heard it, a faint rustle of leaves, the soft padding of footsteps drawing nearer with each passing moment. His heart quickened with a mixture of excitement and apprehension as he realized that he was not alone in the wilderness, that there was something, or someone, else out there, watching and waiting with bated breath. His hand tightened around the grip of his rifle, his fingers itching to unleash the fury of his weapon upon whatever unseen foe lurked in the shadows. With a steady hand and a calm resolve, John raised his rifle, his eyes scanning the darkness for any sign of movement. But the forest remained still, the shadows clinging to their secrets like a lover's embrace. And then, as if from out of the very heart of darkness itself, it came, a monstrous shape looming in the night, its eyes gleaming with an otherworldly hunger. Fear gripped John's heart like a vice as he beheld the creature before him, a hulking behemoth of fur and fang, its breath hot and fetid in the chill night air. With a primal roar, it launched itself at John, its claws slashing through the air with deadly intent. But John was no stranger to danger, no novice to the ways of the wild. With a skill honed through years of survival, he met the creature head-on, his rifle barking defiance into the night. The sound echoed through the forest like thunder, reverberating off the ancient trees and sending a shiver down John's spine. Yet, for all his bravery and skill, he soon found himself outmatched by the sheer ferocity of his foe. The creature was a force of nature, a living embodiment of the wild itself, and try as he might, John could not seem to gain the upper hand. With each passing moment, the creature's attacks grew more frenzied, more savage, until it seemed as though John's fate was sealed. Desperation clawed at his insides as he fought for his life, his muscles straining against the relentless onslaught of his attacker. But even as his strength waned, and his breath came in ragged gasps, John refused to surrender to the darkness that threatened to consume him. Just when it seemed that all hope was lost, a beam of light pierced the darkness, casting the scene in stark relief. It was a search party drawn to the sound of gunfire in the night, their voices ringing out like a clarion call in the darkness. With their help, John was able to fend off the creature and escape the forest with his life intact. But as he emerged from the wilderness, shaken but alive, John couldn't shake the feeling that he had glimpsed something beyond the veil of reality, something primal and ancient that lurked just beyond the edge of civilization. And though he returned home safely, the memory of that fateful night would haunt him for the rest of his days, a reminder of the untamed wilderness that lay just beyond the safety of civilization's embrace. In the days and weeks that followed, John would find himself haunted by dreams of the creature that had stalked him through the darkness, its eyes burning with a hunger that seemed to pierce his very soul. And though he tried to convince himself that it was merely a trick of the mind, a figment of his imagination born of fear and exhaustion, deep down, John knew the truth, that there were forces in the world far older and more powerful than any he could ever hope to comprehend. And as he gazed out into the wilderness that stretched endlessly before him, he couldn't help but wonder what other secrets lay hidden beneath its ancient boughs, waiting to be discovered by those brave enough to seek them out. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the dense forest. The air turned crisp, and the scent of damp earth hung heavy. I adjusted the straps of my backpack, my fingers brushing against the cold steel of my hunting knife. Tonight, I would venture deep into the heart of the Whispering Woods, a place where legends whispered of ancient spirits and cursed souls. My name is Ethan, and I am a seasoned hunter. I've tracked elusive game across desolate tundras and sweltering deserts, but nothing could prepare me for what awaited me in these dark woods. The locals spoke of eerie occurrences, disappearing hunters, ghostly apparitions, and the haunting cries of animals that echoed through the night. I stepped off the trail, my boots sinking into the damp soil. The moon peeked through the thick canopy, illuminating twisted roots and gnarled branches. My breath misted in the chilly air as I followed the faint trail deeper into the forest. The trees seemed to lean in, their skeletal limbs reaching for me like bony fingers. The first sign of trouble came when I stumbled upon a deer carcass. Its eyes were wide open, frozen in terror. But it wasn't the kill that unnerved me. It was the way the blood had pooled around it. Perfectly symmetrical circles, as if something had drained the life force from the animal with surgical precision. I pressed on, my senses on high alert. The forest seemed to close in, the trees whispering secrets I couldn't decipher. My flashlight flickered, casting eerie shadows on the moss-covered ground. I heard footsteps behind me, soft, deliberate. I spun around, but there was no one there. Only the rustling leaves and the distant hoot of an owl. As I continued, the forest grew denser. The moon disappeared, leaving me in pitch darkness. My heart pounded as I stumbled upon a clearing. In its center stood an ancient stone altar, covered in moss and lichen. Symbols were etched into its surface, symbols I couldn't recognize. The air grew colder, and I felt eyes upon me. That's when I saw her, a woman draped in tattered white robes. Her eyes were hollow, her skin translucent. She beckoned me closer, her voice a soft whisper carried by the wind. "Ethan," she said, a breath chilling my bones. "You seek the truth, don't you?" I nodded, unable to tear my gaze away from her. "What truth?" "The curse," she replied. "The Whispering Woods were once a sacred place, but greed and bloodshed tainted its soil. Hunters like you come seeking trophies, unaware of the price they pay." I remembered the deer, the perfect circles of blood. "What happened here?" "Long ago," she said, "a hunter killed a rare stag, a guardian of these woods. In its dying breath, it cursed the land. Now, those who hunt here are hunted in return." I glanced at my knife, suddenly feeling its weight. "How do I break the curse?" Her eyes bore into mine. "You must offer a sacrifice, a life for a life. Kill the beast that haunts these woods, and the curse will lift." "What beast?" I asked, my voice barely audible. She pointed toward the heart of the forest. "The Wendigo, the embodiment of hunger and desperation. It feasts on lost souls." I swallowed hard, my mind racing. But I had come too far to turn back. The Wendigo awaited me, its hunger insatiable. I tightened my grip on the knife and stepped into the darkness, ready to face the horror that lurked within the whispering woods. The forest grew darker as I delved deeper, the silence broken only by the rustling of leaves and the occasional distant howl. Every step felt heavier, laden with the weight of impending doom. I clutched my knife tighter, the metal biting into my palm. Fear gnawed at my insides, but determination drove me forward. Hours passed, the moon shrouded by thick clouds. I lost track of time, my senses dulled by the oppressive darkness. Shapes shifted in the shadows, playing tricks on my mind. I heard whispers, soft, sinister voices that seemed to emanate from the very trees themselves. And then I saw it, a pair of glowing eyes, piercing the darkness like beacons of malice. The Wendigo stood before me, towering and grotesque. Its emaciated frame was draped in tattered fur, its claws like daggers gleaming in the faint moonlight. I could feel its hunger, a primal urge that sent shivers down my spine. I gripped my knife, steeling myself for the battle ahead. The Wendigo snarled, a guttural sound that echoed through the forest. It lunged at me, its claws slashing through the air with deadly precision. I dodged, narrowly avoiding its attack. We circled each other, locked in a deadly dance. I struck out with my knife, aiming for its heart, but the Wendigo was fast, too fast. It darted away, taunting me with its mocking laughter. Sweat dripped down my brow, mingling with the blood from my wounds. But I refused to give up. With a roar of defiance, I charged at the creature, my knife flashing in the darkness. I felt its claws tear into my flesh, felt the searing pain of its bite. But still, I fought on, fueled by desperation and a flicker of hope. And then it happened. A flash of silver in the darkness, a surge of triumphant energy. My knife found its mark, burying itself deep into the Wendigo's chest. The creature let out a deafening shriek, a sound that echoed through the forest like a death knell. I watched as the Wendigo crumbled to the ground, its form dissolving into wisps of shadow and smoke. The curse had been broken, the darkness lifted. I collapsed to my knees, exhausted but victorious. The next morning, I emerged from the whispering woods, a changed man. The sun shone brightly overhead, banishing the lingering shadows of the night. I bore the scars of my battle with the Wendigo, but I wore them proudly. They were a testament to my strength and resilience. As I walked away from the forest, I couldn't help but feel a sense of gratitude. The whispering woods had tested me, pushed me to my limits, but it had also granted me a gift, the gift of redemption. I vowed never to forget the lessons I had learned within its depths, to always respect the power of the natural world. And so, dear reader, I leave you with this cautionary tale. The whispering woods may be a place of darkness and danger, but it is also a place of wonder and mystery. Approach with caution, but do not let fear rule your heart. For within its depths lies the truth of who we are and what we are capable of achieving. In the heart of the dense whispering woods, where the trees stood ancient and gnarled, a lone figure moved with purpose. Jack, a seasoned hunter, paid no heed to the ominous whispers that seemed to weave through the branches, warning him to turn back. His eyes were fixed on a single goal, the legendary buck said to roam these haunted woods. As dusk settled, casting long shadows across the forest floor, Jack's senses sharpened. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig, sent a thrill of anticipation coursing through his veins. He pressed forward, determined to claim his prize and silence the doubters who scoffed at the tales of the whispering woods. But as he drew closer to his elusive quarry, the forest seemed to come alive with whispered voices, urging him to flee. Ignoring the warnings, Jack pressed on, his heart pounding in his chest as he closed in on the majestic buck. Then, just as victory seemed within reach, darkness descended like a suffocating blanket, enveloping the forest in an impenetrable shroud. Panic seized Jack as he stumbled through the underbrush, disoriented and lost in the blackness. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, until they seemed to echo inside his very mind, driving him to the brink of madness. Desperate to escape, Jack pushed forward, his fear mounting with each passing moment. Finally, he burst into a small clearing, his breath catching in his throat at the sight before him. Shadowy figures lurked among the trees, their eyes gleaming with malevolence as they closed in on him. With a cry of terror, Jack turned and fled, the mocking laughter of his pursuers echoing in his ears as he stumbled out of the woods, vowing never to return to the cursed depths of the Whispering Woods. In another corner of the wilderness, amidst the rugged peaks and valleys of the Pacific Northwest, a group of friends embarked on a hunting trip that would soon descend into nightmare. Among them was Mark, a seasoned outdoorsman renowned for his fearlessness in the face of danger. As they trekked deeper into the wilderness, their laughter and banter masked the growing sense of unease that hung heavy in the air. But as night fell and the campfire dwindled to embers, their mirth turned to fear as they realized they were being hunted by something not quite human. Shadows danced at the edge of their vision, and strange symbols etched into the trees served as a sinister warning of the horrors to come. With each passing hour, the sense of dread only grew stronger until finally, they were confronted by the creature that had been stalking them all along. With eyes that glowed like embers in the darkness, it emerged from the shadows, a twisted mockery of the natural world. In a desperate bid for survival, the brood fought back with all their strength, but it was no use against the primal fury of their attacker. One by one, they fell before it, their screams swallowed by the unforgiving wilderness as they became just another chapter in the forest's dark history. And yet, the horrors of the wilderness were not confined to the deep woods and rugged mountains. In the murky depths of a haunted marsh, a lone hunter named Sarah found herself ensnared in a nightmare from which there seemed to be no escape. Drawn to the marsh by tales of a legendary beast that prowled its waters, Sarah was determined to prove her worth as a hunter. But as she ventured deeper into the marsh, she soon realized that she was not alone. Strange apparitions lurked in the mist, their haunting cries sending shivers down her spine as she struggled to maintain her composure. Every sound seemed magnified, every shadow a potential threat, until she could no longer distinguish between reality and the phantoms that haunted her dreams. In a desperate bid for escape, Sarah raced through the marsh, the cold mud sucking at her boots as she fought to put distance between herself and whatever lurked in the darkness. But just as she thought she was safe, a pair of glowing eyes appeared before her, their malevolent gaze fixing her in place as the beast emerged from the depths. With a primal roar, it lunged at her, its fetid breath hot on her neck as she scrambled for her life. In the end, it was only through sheer luck and determination that Sarah managed to escape the marsh, vowing never to return to its cursed waters again. In the world of hunting, danger lurks around every corner, waiting to ensnare the unwary in its deadly embrace. From the whispering woods to the haunted marsh, these terrifying tales serve as a stark reminder that even the most experienced hunters are not immune to the horrors that lie hidden in the wilderness. So the next time you venture into the wild, remember to heed the warnings of those who have gone before you, lest you too become just another victim of the dark and unforgiving world of hunting horror. In the heart of the dense Appalachian forests, where the trees stand tall and ancient, their branches reaching out like skeletal fingers towards the sky, there lies a tale of terror that chills the marrow of those who dare to tread its shavered paths. It is a tale of a seasoned hunter named Jake, whose love for the hunt led him deep into the wilderness one misty morning in pursuit of a prized buck. Jake was no stranger to the ways of the forest. He had spent countless hours stalking his prey, honing his skills to perfection. Armed with his trusty rifle and years of experience, he ventured forth, his senses keen and his determination unwavering. But little did he know that on this fateful day, he would encounter a nightmare beyond his wildest imagination. As the day wore on and dusk began to descend, Jake found himself deep within the heart of the forest, following an elusive trail that seemed to lead him ever further into the unknown. The air grew thick with the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves, and strange noises echoed through the trees, sending shivers down his spine. Ignoring the unease that gnawed at his insides, Jake pressed on, his eyes scanning the dense undergrowth for any sign of his quarry. But as darkness fell like a heavy blanket over the forest, he realized with a sinking heart that he was lost. The dense foliage seemed to close in around him, suffocating him with its oppressive presence, and panic clawed at his chest like a beast hungry for prey. It was then that Jake first sensed he was not alone in the forest. Unseen eyes watched his every move from the shadows, their gaze filled with a malevolent intent that sent a cold shiver down his spine. He tried to shake off the feeling of being hunted, to convince himself that it was merely his imagination running wild in the darkness. But deep down, he knew that something was terribly wrong. Suddenly, a guttural growl pierced the silence, freezing Jake in his tracks. His blood ran cold as he caught a glimpse of glowing eyes in the darkness, their malevolent gaze fixed upon him like a predator sizing up its prey. With a mounting sense of dread, Jake realized that he was being hunted by something far more sinister than any buck or bear. Desperate to escape the clutches of whatever lurked in the darkness, Jake fled through the underbrush, his heart pounding in his chest like a drumbeat of terror. Branches clawed at his skin, and roots threatened to trip him at every turn, but he dared not stop for fear of what lurked behind him in the shadows. Yet, no matter how fast he ran, the unseen presence pursued him relentlessly, its sinister presence closing in with each passing moment. It was as if the very forest itself had come alive, a malevolent force intent on claiming him for its own. Just when Jake thought he could run no further, he stumbled upon an ancient cabin hidden deep within the forest, its timbers weathered and worn by the passage of time. With nowhere else to turn, he sought refuge within its decaying walls, praying for morning to come and banish the horrors of the night. But as the first light of dawn broke through the canopy, Jake made a chilling discovery. The cabin, once a sanctuary from the darkness, was now a tomb, its walls adorned with the skeletal remains of those who had sought shelter before him. With a sinking heart, Jake realized that he was not alone in the forest, and that the true horror had only just begun. For within the depths of the Appalachian wilderness, an ancient evil lurked, a darkness older than time itself, hungry for the souls of those who dared to trespass upon its domain. And as Jake stood amidst the ruins of the cabin, he knew that he was its next victim, destined to become another lost soul swallowed up by the hunter's nightmare. With a pounding heart and trembling hands, Jake tried to gather his wits, to devise a plan to escape the clutches of the malevolent force that held him captive. But as he peered out into the forest, he saw nothing but darkness stretching out before him, an endless expanse of shadows that seemed to go on forever. Fear gnawed at his insides, threatening to consume him whole, but Jake knew that he could not afford to give in to despair. With grim determination, he set about fortifying the cabin, using whatever materials he could find to block the windows and reinforce the doors. But even as he worked, he could feel the presence of the ancient evil pressing in around him, its malevolent influence seeping through the walls like a noxious gas. Every creak of the floorboards, every rustle of the wind outside, sent a shiver down his spine, reminding him of the horrors that lurked just beyond the cabin's walls. Hours passed like an eternity as Jake huddled inside the cabin, his senses strained to the breaking point as he waited for the inevitable onslaught. But as the night wore on and the darkness deepened, he began to wonder if perhaps he had imagined the whole thing, if maybe he had allowed fear to cloud his judgment and lead him astray. Just as he was beginning to let his guard down, however, a blood-curdling scream shattered the silence, sending Jake scrambling for his rifle with trembling hands. Outside, the forest seemed to come alive with a cacophony of unearthly sounds, as if the very earth itself were groaning in agony. With a sinking heart, Jake realized that the time for hiding was over. The time for fighting had come. Gripping his rifle tightly, he stepped out into the darkness, his senses on high alert as he searched for any sign of his unseen foe. But try as he might, he could find no trace of the creature that hunted him, no hint of its presence save for the overwhelming sense of dread that hung heavy in the air. It was as if the forest itself had swallowed it whole, leaving Jake to wonder if perhaps he had been chasing shadows all along. As dawn broke over the horizon, bathing the forest in golden light, Jake emerged from the depths of the wilderness, his body battered and bruised, but his spirit unbroken. For though he had faced horrors beyond imagining, he had emerged victorious, a survivor in a world consumed by darkness. And as he made his way back to civilization, leaving the nightmare of the forest behind him, Jake knew that he would never forget the terror he had faced, nor the strength he had found within himself to overcome it. For in the heart of the dense Appalachian forests, where the trees stand tall and ancient, there lies a tale of terror that chills the marrow of those who dare to tread its shadowed paths. But there also lies a tale of courage, of resilience, and of the indomitable human spirit that refuses to be extinguished, even in the face of unspeakable evil.